A major legal battle is erupting in California, one that could have ripple effects far beyond the state's borders. The Golden State, often seen as a bellwether for national trends, now finds itself at the center of a heated dispute over the very foundation of American democracy: how political power is distributed. The U.S. Department of Justice has stepped into the fray, joining a high-profile lawsuit against Governor Gavin Newsom and the state government. At the heart of the controversy is California's newly drawn congressional map, which critics say was crafted to benefit one party over another. With the DOJ's involvement, what began as a state-level dispute has now escalated into a national test case. The case raises urgent questions about race, fairness, and the mechanics of American democracy. Protesters have gathered outside government buildings, demanding transparency and accountability in the redistricting process. The lawsuit alleges that California's map is an unconstitutional act of racial gerrymandering, violating the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Legal experts warn that the outcome could set a precedent for how courts interpret the use of race in drawing political boundaries. Fueling the controversy is Proposition 50, a measure recently passed by voters that shifted redistricting power back to the state legislature. Supporters argued it would make the process more accountable, but critics say it opened the door to partisan manipulation and backroom deals. Republican Assemblymember David Tengipa, a vocal critic of the new map, filed the original lawsuit. He claims the redistricting is nothing more than a partisan power grab designed to entrench Democratic control and silence opposing voices. Now, with the Department of Justice lending its considerable weight to the case, the stakes have never been higher. This is no longer just a fight between political parties, it's a constitutional showdown that could reshape the rules of the game for decades. On one side stand Governor Newsom and Democratic lawmakers, who argue that the new map is necessary to protect the voting power of minority communities. They insist that the changes are about ensuring fair representation for all Californians, especially those who have historically been marginalized. On the other side are the Department of Justice and Republican leaders, who contend that California crossed a constitutional line by making race the primary factor in redistricting. They warn that such actions threaten the integrity of the electoral process and could undermine public trust in future elections. The outcome of this legal battle could have sweeping consequences, potentially redefining how political maps are drawn, not just in California, but across the entire nation. As the case moves forward, all eyes are on the Golden State, where the future of American democracy may be decided. To understand the ongoing battle over voting rights and political power, let's break down two crucial terms: redistricting and gerrymandering. These concepts shape the very foundation of our democracy, influencing who gets represented and how decisions are made at every level of government. Redistricting is the process that happens every 10 years, right after the census. Its purpose is to redraw the boundaries of legislative districts, making sure each district has roughly the same number of people. This is meant to ensure equal population and fair representation, so that every person's vote carries similar weight, no matter where they live. It's a massive undertaking that affects everything from Congress to local school boards. But while redistricting is supposed to be fair, the process can be manipulated for political gain. This is where gerrymandering comes in. Gerrymandering is the act of drawing district lines in a way that gives one political party or group an unfair advantage over others. Instead of voters choosing their politicians, politicians can end up choosing their voters. There are a couple of main tactics used in gerrymandering. One is called cracking, which means splitting up groups of opposition voters across many districts so their influence is diluted and they can't win anywhere. The other is packing, where opposition voters are concentrated into just a few districts, allowing the dominant party to win more seats elsewhere with smaller margins. Both methods distort the idea of fair representation and can dramatically change election outcomes. The term gerrymandering dates all the way back to 1812. It's named after Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry, who approved a district shaped so oddly it looked like a salamander. The name stuck, and the practice has been controversial ever since. Over the years, both major political parties have used gerrymandering to entrench their power. This often leaves voters feeling frustrated and powerless, believing their choices don't really matter because the outcome is already rigged by the way the lines are drawn. In California, the current lawsuit adds another layer to the debate. Racial gerrymandering. This is when race becomes the dominant factor in drawing district lines, sometimes splitting up or concentrating minority communities in ways that affect their political voice. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was designed to protect minority voters from discrimination and ensure their voices are heard, but the Supreme Court has ruled that while race can be considered, it cannot be the main reason for a district's shape. This creates a complex legal landscape for mapmakers, so those who draw the maps must carefully balance the requirements of the Voting Rights Act with the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection for all citizens. It's a delicate process, with high stakes for communities across the country. In many ways, it's like walking a legal and political tightrope, where one misstep can have major consequences for representation and democracy. Now, with the California case, this balancing act is under a national spotlight, raising big questions about fairness, equality, and the future of American democracy. California's new map, drawn after Proposition 50, is at the center of the storm. The Democratic-led legislature redrew 52 districts, aiming to reflect the state's diversity and countermoves in states like Texas. Analysts say up to 5 Republican-held seats could flip, making the map a game-changer. Critics argue the map was engineered for partisan gain, using race to reshape districts in illogical ways. The process bypassed the Independent Citizens Commission, a move supporters call a necessary emergency step, but opponents call a rollback of reform. Defenders say the map finally gives Latino communities a real voice, fulfilling the Voting Rights Act's promise. The debate: is this a racial gerrymander or overdue representation? The Department of Justice's intervention in this case is about more than just political maneuvering. It's a direct and serious accusation of racial gerrymandering, a practice that has long been controversial in American democracy. The DOJ is stepping in to argue that the way California drew its new congressional districts goes beyond normal political considerations and crosses into unconstitutional territory. According to the DOJ, California used race as the predominant factor in drawing at least one of its new districts, which they say violates the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection under the law. This isn't just a technicality. It's a claim that the state prioritized racial demographics over traditional redistricting principles, such as keeping communities intact or respecting geographic boundaries. The evidence cited by the DOJ includes not only public statements from officials, but also internal communications and emails that reveal a deliberate focus on creating a Latino-majority district. These documents suggest that race was not just one factor among many, but the driving force behind the district's design. The DOJ argues that while it is legal, and sometimes necessary, to empower minority voters and ensure fair representation, making race the dominant or sole reason for drawing district lines crosses a constitutional line. The courts have long held that race can be considered, but it cannot be the overriding factor. The legal standard is clear: race may play a role in redistricting, but it cannot override traditional principles like compactness, contiguity, and respect for existing political boundaries. When those principles are set aside in favor of racial considerations, the courts may find a violation of the Constitution. The DOJ's position is that the law must strive to be as colorblind as possible, even when addressing the legacy of past discrimination. This means that while efforts to remedy historical injustices are important, they must be balanced against the constitutional requirement for equal treatment. Ultimately, this lawsuit will test the boundaries of how far states can go in remedying discrimination without crossing into unconstitutional racial sorting. The outcome could set a significant precedent for how race and redistricting are handled across the country. Governor Newsom's team calls the lawsuit a political attack by opponents who lost at the ballot box. They argue California's map is a direct response to Republican-led states like Texas, which they say gerrymandered to dilute minority votes. Newsom frames Proposition 50 as a defense of democracy, not a power grab. Supporters claim the new Latino majority district empowers a growing community and fulfills the Voting Rights Act. They point to Prop 50's passage as a mandate from voters, insisting the legislature is carrying out the people's will. For Newsom's camp, the lawsuit is an attempt to overturn a democratic outcome. Proposition 50, the Election Rigging Response Act, temporarily gave redistricting power back to California's legislature. Supporters called it an emergency measure to counter unfair maps in states like Texas and Florida. Critics, including Republicans and reformers, called it a step backward, letting politicians draw their own districts. Despite controversy, Prop 50 passed, fueled by fears about national politics. The new map, quickly drawn by Democrats, is now under legal fire for alleged unconstitutional gerrymandering. The lawsuit challenges not just the map, but the process Prop 50 enabled. California's fight is part of a nationwide redistricting war. Both parties are using courts to challenge maps they see as unfair, with high-stakes battles in Texas, Louisiana, and beyond. The Supreme Court's upcoming decisions could set new precedents, directly impacting California's case. In Republican states, Democrats allege racial gerrymandering. In Democratic states, Republicans use the same arguments. This tit-for-tat legal warfare is reshaping the political landscape everywhere. Newsom's fight fire with fire approach reflects this national arms race. The DOJ's involvement signals the federal government's intent to enforce constitutional rules, no matter which party benefits. This lawsuit isn't just political theater, it affects every voter's power. Gerrymandered districts can make your vote meaningless, create safe seats, and fuel polarization. Fair representation is the foundation of democracy, but manipulated maps break up real communities and dilute their voices. The core question: should districts reflect communities or serve political and racial goals? The case also spotlights the tension between the Voting Rights Act and the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause. Striking the right balance is one of America's toughest legal challenges. When voters lose trust in the process, democracy suffers. The outcome will shape whether elections truly reflect the people's will. The case, Tangapa vs. Newsom, now with the DOJ as plaintiff, heads to federal court. Plaintiffs will seek an injunction to block the new map before the 2026 midterms. The court's early decisions could reshape California's political landscape overnight. Both sides will present evidence and the losing party will almost certainly appeal. The case could reach the Supreme Court, setting a national precedent on race and redistricting. If the map is struck down, California may have to redraw districts under court supervision. The stakes, nothing less than the rules of American democracy itself.